You really shouldn't have left your laptop open, Calla. Milo's voice was smooth, almost tender. He always spoke like that when he thought he had the upper hand. Like this was a conversation between two rational adults and not a man calmly confessing to stealing nearly every dollar from our shared accounts while I slept 2 rooms away. Honestly, he continued, I only took what I deserved. You've always acted like it was yours anyway. We both know I earned a piece of it. I just helped myself to my share. I stood by the stove in my kitchen in Asheville, still in the navy silk robe he'd given me for our 5th anniversary. The morning sun hadn't even crept past the dogwoods outside my window, but the world had already split open around me. I could hear birds outside, the soft clink of a spoon in a ceramic mug. My body was moving, pouring coffee, buttering toast, but my mind was frozen on one word. Deserved. That's what he said. As if I owed him something. As if my discipline, my planning, my long nights and early mornings had been some shared currency he was entitled to by default. You'll be fine, he said, almost laughing now. You've always been fine. You've got savings tucked away. Retirement accounts. All your little color-coded spreadsheets. You probably won't even miss it. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I just stared out at the mist curling over the Blue Ridge Mountains and let his words settle like embers inside my chest. I'm in Atlanta, by the way, he added, the smugness seeping into every syllable. Heading to Tulum tonight. Don't worry, I didn't use your points. I've got my own now. Then he hung up. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Instead, I sat at the table, opened my laptop, and pulled up my accounts. Not the ones Milo could see. Not the ones he would have guessed about. The others. The ones I built quietly, carefully, after I started noticing the little cracks in his stories. My name is Calla Winslow, and I am 41 years old. I work as a forensic CPA for a private firm out of Charlotte that specializes in uncovering corporate fraud. I've testified in court. I've frozen offshore accounts. I once brought down a tech CEO for embezzling $2.4 million from his own company while paying his mistress in Bitcoin. I built my career on 2 simple truths. People always leave a trail. The quietest person in the room usually knows the most. And yet, somehow, the man I shared my home, my body, and my passwords with for 7 years thought he could steal from me and disappear into the jungle with a margarita in one hand and God knows who in the other. He thought I'd panic. That I'd chase. That I'd beg. But I don't chase. I don't beg. I investigate. I document. And then I dismantle quietly. The thing about people like Milo is that they mistake kindness for ignorance. They confuse patience with weakness. What he didn't know, what he never cared to ask, was that I grew up with a father who blew our savings on poker games and business opportunities. I watched my mother rebuild from nothing 3 separate times before I turned 16. I learned early that love is no guarantee of safety. And that trust, once broken, doesn't grow back the same. That's why I always had a backup plan. Several, actually. Milo's mistake wasn't just stealing from me. It was assuming I wouldn't see it coming. And now? I was going to show him just how dangerous a woman like me could be. Looking back now, I can't pinpoint a single moment when Milo changed. It wasn't one argument or one missed anniversary. It was quieter than that. Slower. Like a slow leak under the floorboards, rotting everything from the inside out while the surface still looked clean and polished. We met at a charity gala in downtown Asheville 7.5 years ago. I wasn't even supposed to be there. My firm had sponsored a table at the last minute, and I filled in for a colleague who caught the flu. I remember Milo was wearing a charcoal suit that didn't quite fit him, and he made some clever remark about the wine being as dry as the conversation. I laughed despite myself. He was charming in a disarming, slightly chaotic kind of way. Said he was a freelance developer between contracts. He talked fast, moved fast, and had that edge of boyish recklessness that I didn't realize I was still susceptible to. I should have seen the signs even then. I'd been married once before in my late 20s. That man, David, was quiet, predictable, loyal, and dull to the point of numbness. After the divorce, I promised myself I'd never settle for boring again. What I didn't know at the time was that there's a wide, dangerous gulf between boring and unstable. Milo lived in the in-between. He was full of big ideas. Startups, crypto investments, an eco-travel app that never made it past the mock-up phase. He always had a plan, but never a spreadsheet. Always a pitch, but never a budget. In the beginning, I mistook it for ambition. But ambition without discipline is just recklessness in a tuxedo. Cracks began to show about a year into our marriage. The money from his consulting jobs came in fits and starts. Some months we were flush, weekend getaways, new kitchen gadgets, surprise gifts. Other months, I found myself quietly moving money from my personal accounts to cover the mortgage. He always had a reason. Client who ghosted. A payment processing delay. A wire transfer that never went through. I wanted to believe him. And honestly, I did for a while. It wasn't until I caught him browsing my retirement account dashboard one night, thinking I was asleep, that the gears in my head started turning again. That was 18 months ago. I remember lying in bed with my eyes closed, listening as he clicked through tabs he had no reason to open. He muttered something under his breath, probably assuming I couldn't hear. The next morning, I pretended I hadn't noticed. I kissed him goodbye, made my coffee as usual, and left for work. But I didn't forget. That was the day I quietly restructured my finances. I moved my retirement funds into a private investment account under a new LLC. I shifted my liquid savings to a family trust, one my mother had set up before she passed. I even rerouted my paychecks to a different bank entirely. The joint account Milo had access to? I left just enough in it to keep the illusion intact. And then I waited. Over the next few months, I played the role of the supportive wife. I nodded along as he talked about new ventures and networking dinners. I pretended not to notice when he started working late more often, or when his shirts came back from the dry cleaners with faint traces of perfume I didn't wear. There was a name that showed up once on his Uber receipts, Isla. I never asked who she was. I didn't need to. Instead, I logged every suspicious charge, every unexplained ATM withdrawal, every quiet lie disguised as convenience. He thought I was asleep. He thought I was stupid. He thought I was in love enough to never question him. But love isn't blindness. Not anymore. Not for me. And certainly not when I'd spent the last decade tracking the financial footprints of liars who thought they were smarter than everyone else. It was around this time that I started preparing the file. I called it Plan C on my desktop, short for contingency. I filled it with screenshots of his credit card statements, flagged transactions, flagged hotel check-ins, and his growing trail of digital carelessness. I even added a voice memo of one of his phone calls I overheard when he forgot to mute himself. Yeah, she's still clueless. Honestly, I'll be gone before she even realizes. He was half right. I had been clueless. But not anymore. And now that Milo had actually gone through with it, had taken what he thought was mine and tried to disappear, Plan C was no longer theoretical. It was active. He'd made the first move. But I'd already placed the board. And I never play a game I don't intend to win. The first thing I did after Milo's call wasn't cancel credit cards or alert the bank. It was pour another cup of coffee. I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the early morning stillness, and reviewed the file I'd been building for months. Milo thought he'd made the first move, but the truth was, this game started the night I watched him scan my retirement account while I pretended to sleep. He just hadn't realized it. I opened the folder labeled Plan C and began flipping through the subfolders. Banking activity. Shared expenses. Unauthorized charges. Digital surveillance. Personal notes. Everything was there. Every purchase he tried to hide, every slip-up he made. He'd underestimated the woman who could reconcile an 8-figure audit down to the last cent. That was his second mistake. The first? Thinking I wouldn't be prepared. When I met Imani Green, my attorney, 6 months ago, she told me something I never forgot. The moment you think you need a lawyer, you're already 6 months late. I'd met Imani through a mutual contact at a fintech seminar. She specialized in high-asset divorces, especially those involving digital fraud and hidden marital assets. We hit it off over cocktails, talking shop, data encryption, asset tracing, financial gaslighting. The end of the night, I asked for her card. Just in case. We'd only met in person twice before today. Once at a private cafe in Durham, and again at her office in Charlotte. I had presented her with a red leather folder of documents and a USB drive labeled Private. She reviewed both without asking questions. Just took a long sip of her tea and said, "If he ever makes a move, don't panic. Just call me." So I did. Imani answered on the second ring. "Kala, I was expecting your call eventually. What's he done?" "He moved $84,000 out of our joint account last night. He said it was his share." I kept my tone level like I was reading a grocery list. "He used my laptop after I went to bed. Said I left it open." There was a short silence on the line, then Imani replied, "You didn't, though." "No. Course not. I created a fake login environment for exactly this scenario. It looks real but redirects to a dummy account that logs all keystrokes." A chuckle. "Remind me never to cross you." I heard the clack of her keyboard. "Okay, Kala. First things first, I'll start preparing the paperwork for an emergency financial injunction. We'll file by tomorrow morning. He won't be able to move another cent without hitting a wall of legal concrete." "Perfect. You've still got the original trust documents for your retirement and investment accounts?" "Yes. Digitally and hard copy." "And your backup accounts, the ones with your mother's trust?" "Untouched." "Then it's time to activate the firewall." Imani was meticulous. She never raised her voice, never reacted emotionally, and I liked that about her. She reminded me a lot of myself, especially in situations like this. While she began the formal process of freezing Milo's access to every remaining joint asset, I logged into the 2 financial monitoring platforms I'd quietly set up last year. MintGuard Pro, which tracks and logs login attempts across multiple bank portals. SpectreTrack, a digital footprint tool that notifies me the moment anyone accesses or attempts to access shared cloud accounts or financial platforms using compromised credentials. It lit up like a Christmas tree. 3 failed attempts to access my Roth IRA. 2 login tries from a device registered in Atlanta, Georgia. And 1 flagged attempt to request a wire transfer to an international account in the Cayman Islands. He was fast. But I was faster. I compiled the reports and forwarded them to Imani, copying only one other recipient, Silas Hartley, my contact at the regional branch of Adair Federal Credit Union, where Milo had attempted the transfer. Silas and I had worked together on 2 corporate embezzlement cases last year. He knew my background. He also knew how to move discreetly. His response came in less than 10 minutes. "Kala, I see what's happening. I've already flagged all associated accounts and forwarded the attempted transactions to our legal department. The fraud detection system will initiate a soft lock. If he tries anything else, it escalates to federal level." "You good?" I responded. "More than. Let me know if he contacts the bank directly or shows up in person." "Will do. Heads up. We'll likely need to escalate this to Treasury-level reporting within 72 hours. You've got this." I did have this. Because while Milo was sipping overpriced cocktails at the airport lounge and flirting with whatever girl he'd convinced to drop her life for a business opportunity, I was quietly reprogramming the narrative. He thought he'd won. But all he'd done was spring the trap. See, I wasn't just building a case. I was building evidence. Every login attempt, Every password he guessed wrong. Every transfer he failed to complete. Every lie he thought I was too naive to catch. I had it all. And by the end of the day, Imani would have it too, organized, indexed, time-stamped, and ready for court. What Milo never understood is that I always play the long game. You don't spend 15 years in forensic accounting without learning how to anticipate behavior, especially when the person thinks they're smarter than you. By noon, I had the legal documents signed and notarized. The financial locks were in place. The surveillance was active. My internal timeline was moving ahead exactly as planned. I'd waited 18 months for this. He'd stolen my money, my peace, and my trust. But he'd given me something even more valuable in return. Proof. And now I was going to make him choke on it. Call came just after 7 o'clock the next morning. I was already up, dressed, and reviewing final documents for the injunction filing. A second cup of dark roast sat cooling beside my keyboard when my phone lit up with his name. Milo Penrose. I let it ring twice before answering. "Good morning," I said pleasantly, like he hadn't ripped through my life the day before like a tornado in designer sneakers. There was a pause. Then his voice, tight and agitated, pushed through the line. "Tala, what the hell is going on?" I didn't respond immediately. I took a sip of my coffee and stared out the window at the dew settling over the backyard. I wanted him to sit in the silence. "I tried to transfer the money again this morning," he continued, his tone rising, "and the bank said the accounts are locked. They said there's some kind of investigation." "What did you do?" I leaned back in my chair. "I didn't do anything, Milo," I said softly. "But apparently you did." He scoffed. "Don't play games. I had access to that account for months. We're married, Kala. I have rights. Not to inherited funds placed in protected trusts," I said calmly. "And certainly not to accounts that are in my name only, guarded by legal firewalls and security protocols. You didn't steal from our money, Milo. You tried to steal from me." The line went dead silent for a moment. I imagined him sitting somewhere in his hotel room, still in last night's clothes, trying to piece together how everything had spiraled out of his control in under 24 hours. "I just needed a little liquidity," he finally muttered. "I didn't think you'd freak out like this. You've always been the rational one." That part, at least, was true. I was rational. I was methodical. And now I was done playing nice. "Let me explain something," I said, my voice like steel under velvet. "When you logged into my laptop and attempted to initiate an unauthorized wire transfer, you triggered a cascade of alerts. Adair Federal flagged the transaction. Trust's automated watchdog system logged your IP address. And the Treasury's fraud detection network picked up on your Cayman account activity." "What?" He sounded suddenly winded. "You're exaggerating." "I'm not," I said. "And just so you know, the transfer didn't go through. You tried to move phantom funds. I set up that dummy account precisely for this scenario." I heard a sharp exhale on the other end. A breath that sounded like panic. Finally. "Jesus, Kala. What is this? Some kind of sting operation?" "No, Milo," I said almost gently. "It's a lesson. Actions have consequences. And unfortunately for you, your actions were both stupid and illegal." "You're bluffing," he snapped. "You wouldn't dare turn this into a legal matter." "I already have. You'll be hearing from my attorney shortly. Her name is Imani Green. I suggest you retain counsel of your own." Another beat of silence. And then he tried the last card he had. "Kala, come on. Don't do this. We can work it out. I got scared about money, that's all. Things haven't been easy. You know that." I almost laughed. Not because he was funny, but because he was predictable. When manipulation fails, guilt always follows. "You weren't scared, Milo," I said flatly. "You were greedy. You planned this. You poked around my accounts for months. You researched wire transfers. You created shell accounts and coordinated international banking routes. I made mistakes, okay? He snapped. But that doesn't mean I deserve to have my life destroyed. You tried to destroy mine. You just didn't expect me to be better prepared than you. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. Power doesn't have to be loud. There was a soft knock on my front door. I crossed the living room, phone still pressed to my ear. Through the glass, I saw a courier holding a white envelope. You'll be receiving official notice within the hour, I told him. And just so we're clear, you didn't just attempt theft. You impersonated me in a financial transaction across state lines. That's a federal crime. You wouldn't, he began, but his voice broke. I would. And I already did. I opened the door, signed for the delivery, and turned off the phone without another word. Let him sit in it. Let him sweat. That morning, I took a long walk through my neighborhood, letting the early light settle on my face. The air was crisp, the birds were out, and my mind felt startlingly clear. For the first time in a long time, Milo had no idea what was coming next. But I did. By 9 a.m., I was sitting across from Imani Green in her sleek, glass-walled office in downtown Charlotte. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the skyline, but I kept my eyes on the stack of files in front of me. Imani, as always, was calm and composed, dressed in a pale gray pantsuit and minimal makeup. The kind of woman who didn't need to raise her voice to command a room, she let the facts do it for her. He tried to transfer money again this morning, I said, laying down the newest bank logs. This time from a joint account we rarely use. It was flagged before it left the system. Imani didn't look surprised. She scanned the document, then reached for her pen. You were right to move fast, she said. Our emergency injunction was filed with the county clerk 35 minutes ago. He's now legally prohibited from accessing, transferring, or liquidating any shared assets, retroactively applied from the moment he attempted the first unauthorized wire. And the trust? Fully protected, she confirmed. Irrevocable structure, bulletproof clauses. He never had a legal claim, but now we've got intent to defraud layered on top of it. If we play this right, and we will, he won't just walk away with nothing. He'll walk away owing you. I opened the brown leather folder in front of me and pulled out a series of color-coded tabs. I've documented every suspicious transaction going back 10 months, I said. Hotel stays, luxury purchases, cash withdrawals in cities he had no reason to be in. Dates and locations? Imani asked, flipping through. All labeled and time-stamped. He claimed to be in Denver for a tech convention in February. Meanwhile, his card was swiped at a boutique hotel in Savannah twice, with a room booked under the name J. Callister. Imani's eyes flicked up. A fake name? Likely the woman he's been seeing. I don't have her full identity yet, but I have a lead. There are also rideshare receipts, dinner reservations for two, and a Cartier bracelet purchase from 6 weeks ago. I never received it. She smiled faintly. You realize you just handed me a legal dream, right? Infidelity, financial misconduct, attempted theft. We're looking at adultery with financial malfeasance. He gift-wrapped his own demise. There's more, I said, sliding over a slim USB drive. I installed tracking software on my laptop 6 months ago. He's been logging into my private folders late at night, taking screenshots, possibly sending them to a secondary device. Every keystroke, every timestamp, all recorded. Kala. Imani sat back and gave me a slow nod. You built an entire digital vault. I had to. My voice didn't shake. He's good at lying, but not good at covering his tracks. I knew if he ever made a move, I'd need more than suspicion. Imani reached for her phone and buzzed her paralegal. We're going to initiate forensic preservation on all of this, she said. Chain of custody logs, certified timestamps, the works. I want to be able to walk into court and lay it out like a crime scene. It is a crime scene, I said quietly. Just not the kind that leaves blood. There was a pause. For the first time that morning, I let myself lean back in the chair and breathe. Not out of relief, not yet, but out of clarity. I also had him followed last week, I added. I hired a private investigator after he claimed he was attending a consulting retreat in Nashville. He wasn't in Nashville. Where was he? Palm Springs. At a private villa. With a woman named Jessa Callister. She works at a tequila bar in Asheville. She's 27. Imani blinked. That's oddly specific. I have photos. Video. Copies of travel receipts. Hotel confirmations. GPS logs from the car rental. He bought her a silk dress from a boutique 2 hours after claiming he was attending a financial planning seminar. I tracked the charge. Imani whistled softly. God, I love a well-prepared client. It's not just about revenge, I said. It's about clarity. About making sure that everything is documented so he can't twist it later. He'll try to play the victim. He always does. Not this time, she said. This time you control the narrative. She stood, gathering the materials. We'll subpoena the accounts he tried to hide. We'll freeze the rest. He's going to realize very quickly that the world doesn't run on charm and excuses anymore. As I stood to leave, I felt taller than I had in months. Not physically, but internally. Like my spine had straightened beneath the weight of facts, logic, and unshakable truth. I paused at the door, then turned back. One more thing, I said. I included a clause in the trust documentation. If he ever attempted to access the funds fraudulently, he automatically forfeits claim to any shared marital assets. Imani's brows lifted. He what? Page 14, Section 3C. It was reviewed and notarized last spring. She opened the folder, scanned it, and her smile widened. That means... He doesn't just lose his claim to the inheritance, I said. He loses the house. The joint savings. Even the retirement account I let him believe we still shared. He's going to implode. Let him. I walked out of the office and into the bright Charlotte daylight, the city humming around me like a machine I'd finally figured out how to control. For the first time in this entire unraveling mess, I didn't feel afraid. I felt ready. The first official notice of federal involvement came 3 days later. I was in my office at Leighton & Crowe Forensics, finishing a review on a corporate embezzlement case when I received a call from Special Agent Delia Ross, Treasury Division Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. Her tone was cordial but firm, the kind you don't mistake for a casual check-in. Ms. Winslow, we've received flagged activity reports from 2 financial institutions regarding attempted wire transfers initiated under your name. You've been listed as the primary contact for the accounts in question. Yes, I said. I've been expecting this. Agent Ross paused. That's uncommon. My husband attempted to access protected funds from a private trust. He used my device, spoofed my credentials, and submitted false verification. I have documentation, device logs, and a full report from my financial attorney. And you're willing to provide all of that to our office? Already compiled. I'll have my legal team send over the digital files and notarized statements within the hour. Another pause. Then, you're a forensic accountant, correct? I am. That explains the detail. In that case, I'd like to schedule a formal statement. There may be criminal charges brought forward, including attempted wire fraud, identity theft, and violations of the Electronic Funds Transfer Act. He attempted an international transfer to an account in the Cayman Islands. Then we're also looking at potential tax evasion and offshore laundering intent, she said. I could hear keys clicking rapidly in the background. He made 3 separate attempts using cloaked VPN access. But he underestimated how fast our monitoring systems trigger. He tends to underestimate women in general. I could feel her smirk through the line. I'll call you later with a formal request, she said. In the meantime, if he contacts you again, notify us immediately. Depending on his next move, we may place a travel hold or a temporary block on his passport. You're expecting him to run? People like him don't like facing consequences. But you already know that. I did. All too well. After we hung up, I sat back in my chair and stared at the glowing skyline outside my office window. It was strange how quickly everything had shifted. Days ago, he was calling me from a hotel suite, laughing about how he deserved my money. Now, he was one red flag away from a criminal indictment. And still, he didn't know the full extent of what was coming. That afternoon, I got a message from Silas Hartley, my contact at Adair Federal. He showed up at the branch in person and tried to talk his way past the fraud team. Said you authorized the transfer and forgot to approve the secondary verification. I informed him that due to flagged risk behavior, no verbal clarification would override current restrictions. Did he get loud? Oh, he tried. But we had security on standby. And the best part? He brought a woman with him. Blonde, mid-20s. Didn't look like she had any idea what was going on. Jessica Callister. That the girlfriend? The most recent one, yes. She looked distressed. I bet she did. What Milo never understood, and maybe still didn't, was that the very systems he was trying to manipulate were designed for people just like him. People who assumed charm could override process. That confidence could replace competence. He'd spent years believing that if he could fake stability long enough, it would become real. But now, for the first time, reality was punching back. Later that evening, I received 3 missed calls from a blocked number. Then a 4th. Then a voicemail. His voice had changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced with something brittle and unsure. Calla. Look, I know you're upset. I didn't think you'd go this far. Can we please talk before lawyers and agents get involved? You don't want this to get ugly. I stared at the screen, then hit save and forwarded the message directly to Imani. A few minutes later, she replied. Perfect. Tempted witness tampering. Threat-adjacent language. Let's build on that. And we did. We added the voicemail to our motion for expedited divorce proceedings. We added it to the file being compiled for Agent Ross. We even filed it under communications under duress in case Milo tried to claim emotional manipulation later. He was digging his own hole. All I had to do was watch him fall into it. The next morning, I went back to the yoga class I hadn't attended in 6 weeks. I moved through the poses with a clarity I hadn't felt in months, maybe years. I'd lived too long in tension, in cautious silence, trying to keep the peace with a man who was quietly engineering my financial erasure behind closed doors. Now I was rebuilding. Not just my accounts. My energy. My trust in myself. My voice. And Milo? He was unraveling. He'd lied to his girlfriend. Lied to his bank. Lied to federal agents without even realizing it. And now every lie was catching up, one document, one voice memo, one fraud alert at a time. He used to call me his safety net. He never expected that I was also the tripwire. The news of Milo's arrest came on a Thursday morning, 2 weeks to the day after he'd called me to casually announce that he'd taken what he deserved. I was standing in the produce aisle of a local co-op, debating between heirloom and cherry tomatoes when my phone rang. Caller ID read Agent Delia Ross. Ms. Winslow, she said, her voice as crisp as the Granny Smith apple one held in my hand. Just wanted to inform you that Mr. Penrose has been taken into custody. I paused by the organic kale, the cart still half full. Where? Phoenix. He was attempting to board a flight to Costa Rica with a one-way ticket under an alias. Fortunately for us, his companion was less discreet. She checked in under her real name and tagged the location on social media. I couldn't help it. I smiled. Did he resist? No. But he tried to claim it was a misunderstanding, that the wire transfer was a clerical error and that you were overreacting. Of course he did. We found 2 burner phones on him, a forged financial power of attorney, and a flash drive with what appears to be account numbers he was planning to try next. How imaginative! Agent Ross chuckled softly. You'd be amazed how many men like him believe charm will get them through a federal fraud investigation. Actually, I said, selecting the heirloom tomatoes, I wouldn't. That evening, I met with Imani in her office. Her mood was light, bordering on gleeful. His arrest guarantees a favorable ruling in the divorce, she said. His counsel will likely push for a quick settlement to avoid further exposure. And the judge isn't going to look kindly on a man who tried to flee the country with a mistress and a forged document in his carry-on. Do we know who's representing him? Public defender, she replied, her voice bone-dry. He couldn't afford private counsel. Not after the asset freeze. Poetic. I handed her the latest file, updated statements, court-approved preservation of voicemail records, and the compiled financial trail of his attempted laundering. You realize, she said, flipping through the stack, you've done the kind of work I usually bill 30 hours for. I needed the truth documented. Not just for court, for me. Well, she said, closing the folder, you've won. Now let's make it official. By the following Monday, Milo had agreed to all terms. He relinquished any claim to the house, the car, the savings, the retirement accounts. He waived spousal support. He admitted in writing to attempting unauthorized financial access, under the advice of his attorney, of course, but still admissible in court. He had nothing left to bargain with. And just like that, a man who once proudly lectured me about leverage had run out of moves. What surprised me most wasn't how quickly he folded, it was how quiet it all became. No more angry voicemails. No more desperate texts. No more gaslighting apologies begging me to be reasonable. Only silence. Then, a week later, a letter arrived, not from Milo but from his girlfriend, Jessa Callister. It was handwritten, slanted, and scattered with emotional swings that couldn't be masked by the soft pink stationery. He told me you cheated him, that you were cold, controlling. I didn't realize he was stealing from you, or lying to both of us. I just thought he was unlucky. I'm sorry. For believing him. For helping him. For everything. I didn't respond. She wasn't the enemy. Just a convenient audience for a man who was good at lying until the moment consequences arrived. And now consequences had a name. And a case file. And a federal docket number. The official sentencing hearing was scheduled for 3 months out. In the meantime, Milo remained in custody without bail, deemed a flight risk. Imani speculated he'd take a plea deal. Most men in his position did. But me? I didn't need to wait for the gavel. The win had already happened the moment I stopped defending someone who had been quietly preparing to destroy me. I used to think justice looked like courtrooms and verdicts and newspaper headlines. But real justice, I learned, is quiet. It's a woman sitting at her kitchen table drinking coffee while her ex is fingerprinted in a federal processing center. It's waking up with a clear mind and a full account. It's knowing the trap you built was never about revenge, it was about liberation. He tried to leave with everything. He left with nothing. And I walked away with peace. 6 weeks after Milo's arrest, I stood in a quiet courtroom in Mecklenburg County as Judge Caroline Rowe signed the final divorce decree. Courtroom was nearly empty. No drama. No last-minute outbursts. Just papers, silence, and the slow tick of a clock mounted high on the paneled wall. Milo appeared via video link from Federal Holding in Arizona. He looked thinner, paler. The bright, arrogant man who once told me I was too cautious for my own good now wore a county-issued jumpsuit and an expression that hovered somewhere between defeat and disbelief. His lawyer, a weary public defender with overstuffed folders and heavy eyes, didn't even argue the terms. The defendant agrees to all financial conditions as stated, she mumbled to the court clerk. He waives any claim to shared marital property. Full division of assets awarded to the petitioner, Ms. Winslow. I didn't flinch. I didn't even look at him. When the judge spoke the final words, divorce granted, all claims closed with prejudice, something in my chest loosened. Not joy. Not even satisfaction. Relief. Through 28 minutes, it was over. I walked out into a warm spring breeze, the kind that smells like cut grass and second chances. I got into my car, the title now legally mine, and pulled out my phone. There was a message from my sister, Mira. Heard the news. 100% proud. Also, please tell me you kept the espresso machine? I smiled. I had kept the espresso machine. And the house. And my retirement. And, more importantly, myself. That afternoon, I met with Patricia Vale, my investment advisor. A sharp woman in her early 60s, Patricia had been quietly helping me reallocate funds during the legal process. We sat across from each other in a sunlit room filled with books and cool air, going over projected returns, property options, and long-term planning. You've done well, Calla, she said, sliding a document across the table. Very few people walk away from something like this without a crater in their finances. Or their spirit. I had time to prepare, I said. I just never thought I'd have to use the escape plan. She nodded, thoughtful. Then pulled out a sealed envelope. Your mother left this for you. I've been instructed to give it to you after your divorce finalized. She gave it to me years ago after she made me trustee of her private fund. I stared at it, surprised. I hadn't known she'd done anything like that. The envelope was thick cream paper with my name written in her handwriting, small, precise, unshaken by time. Inside was a single page. Calla, if you're reading this, something you built with love has broken. But remember, I raised you to stand after falling, not to stay on your knees. Use what's left to build something better. Something yours. Something that no one can take. Love. Mom. I folded the letter and placed it gently in my bag. There was nothing else I needed to hear. That evening, I sat on the back porch of my house with a glass of wine and no particular rush to be anywhere. The sun dipped low behind the trees, casting gold across the yard. There were no more secrets. No locked folders. No ghost logins or fake trips. Just a quiet evening. Mine. Milo would go on to face his sentencing in the fall. With luck or lack thereof, he'd get 2 to 3 years. Enough time to think about everything he'd tried to steal and everything he'd lost. But I wouldn't be there. I didn't need to see it. Justice, when it's real, doesn't require an audience. In the weeks that followed, I began planning a sabbatical. I opened a new file on my desktop. This time it wasn't labeled Plan C. It was called Blueprint, a fresh start, a new practice maybe, my own firm, or maybe just a long trip, alone by design. 'Cause the truth is, Milo was never the threat. It was the part of me that once thought I needed to shrink to be loved, that I had to tolerate discomfort for the sake of peace. That silence was safer than confrontation. Not anymore. He thought he could take my life and run, but all he did was set me free. And now the future was entirely mine.